All right, so I was reading an article today on the homeless here in Arizona, and they pretty much um, outlawed sleeping outside. And I don't know why they equate homelessness with camping, because camping involves enjoying the outdoors with your family in a tent, and you have the ability to go home. Homeless camping, you're living outside, not in a tent, not in a comfortable place. You don't really have it's not camping, it's surviving without a home, and yet they make laws where they call it camping. And again, I think it's a way of making it sound politically correct because it does sound cruel to tell people who don't can't find jobs, don't make enough money, or ended up on the street because of mental illness that they're not allowed to go camping outside and that they have to be somewhere else. And what really struck me as odd, and I was going to do a story on this, but then I just didn't feel like it was the correct thing to do for this channel. So um, I saw this one thing where it says, um, let me ask you, if you woke up tomorrow with no home, no money, and nowhere to go, where would you sleep? And if you couldn't, if they didn't let you, what would you do? And I was there. And so from being on the street, all that happened to me was that you develop a mental disorder. You develop post traumatic stress syndrome from being homeless because you're not allowed to sleep. You're supposed to wander around aimlessly, never laying down anywhere because the the bans on being homeless are inhumane. But I don't think I could do a video like that today. So I just thought I'd bring this up because I thought it was really a strange thing to do. And the opening line in this particular script was, people don't look at me much anymore. But maybe that's the point. Cities like Tempe, they don't want me to exist, not here, not anywhere, because when they say ban sleeping outside, what they're really saying is we're banning you. And I thought that was a really tough thing to say to people who can't really escape their situation. But with that said, I wanted to get into another set of talking points here, and this is going to be the main topic, which was submitted to me by the Internet Complaint Department yesterday night in a comment. And I thought it was a very good comment because it talks about the difficulties of starting your own business because I think it's one of the most annoying comments that I get on a regular basis on my channel is why don't you start your own business? Why don't you start taking control of your own life and stop working for other people? And I thought to myself, are you kidding me? Because that is not it's not a viable option to tell a person at a minimum wage job that they need to start their own business. And yet I've heard it for years throughout all of my minimum wage jobs is I had customers, younger customers. I had customers in their 20s come up to me when I worked at Walmart and they'd say to me as if I were a stupid person. They look at me and it's like you need to start your own business. And I'm like, I'm working at Walmart. What world are you living in which a person that's working a minimum wage job can actually drop everything, go ask a bank for a massive loan with no and with nothing to be able to say that I have money, right? I have no collateral whatsoever. What bank would entrust giving money to a person that obviously has failed at life? But yet it is the most common thing to tell a person. I would say that get a better job and start a business are the two most common things that we like to hurl at people who are broke. I mean, I even heard it from people while I was living on the street that I needed to get a job, and I'm like, do you think that I'm out here because there were great opportunities for me? No. You end up in the gutter because there are no opportunities or it's taking too long to find another job. And that's something that again, the media today was mixed on that. One story I read that said that it was taking a long time to find a job. Another one said that companies weren't hiring. Another one said that uh, regular people don't qualify for better jobs. And that's why you've been stuck at the minimum wage. I mean, that's what I'm assuming, that I've been stuck down there at the bottom my whole life because there's always going to be someone better and they're always going to choose someone that they think is going to have a better attitude at work. I actually had a guy put that into the comment section a couple days ago. He said, I wouldn't hire you millennial stain because your attitude would depress all the rest of my employees. And I'm like, you mean reality depresses ordinary people that have to pretend to be okay at a job that isn't paying them enough to survive on? Well, if that really is what you think your employees show up with, that phony smile and positive attitude at a job that's never going to pay them enough to actually be able to be alive, then you're delusional. Because every worker shows up at a job they don't like with a with the only mindset while being there that I can't afford to lose this job, while at the same time telling themselves I can't afford to work this job. So, isn't that a terrible catch 22? I can't afford to work here, but I also can't afford to lose my job. So, you live in this weird place when you're at work in between fearing losing your job and knowing that you have to find something better, but there's nothing better. And with that said, let's get into today's three talking points. They're all in the usual story mode of talking points because I didn't like, again, the talking points that ChatGPT created for this particular story. So, this is the hidden costs of small business. So, let's get started. They tell you to chase your dreams, to be your own boss, to build something of your own, but what they don't tell you is that the dream can quickly become a nightmare. And this is for a lot of people. You know, maybe at some point you buy into the idea of starting a small business. First of all, what do you think you can do better than everyone else so that your business is successful? I mean, all I see around me right now are restaurants that have gone under. And today I was watching on the Economist that Domino's is heading in that direction too, because people's spending habits change. And when you can't afford a product, either they're going to make it cheaper so you can still afford it. That's why we have shrinkflation in the supermarkets everywhere. Or you as a business aren't going to exist. If you've seen the remodeled what do you call Pizza Huts, they're moving closer and closer to completely automated restaurants so they can get rid of the one thing that they're having the hardest time finding, and that's labor for the minimum wage jobs, because nobody wants to work for the minimum wage. I would say that nobody wants to work for any wage at this point unless you're the CEO of a major health care corporation. And that was a bad joke, but all I could see was that image of that guy getting taken out by a guy that looks like straight out of a James Bond movie. But with that said, let's get into our second talking point. I believe in the dream too. I started with ambition, hope, and just enough savings to open my little shop. I thought I would escape poverty, make a better life for me and my kids. But what I didn't know was how quickly ambition can turn into exploitation. This is actually, they just used the word kids. And today I got a second invite to the Christmas party at work. And people in technology don't typically go to social events. We're not social people. We don't get along with people. We don't go to parties. We don't go outside. We don't have much interaction with the outside world, and that's why we're considered strange. I mean, I if you met me in person, you would consider me to be strange. But I told the woman that was hosting the party that, and this is a great excuse, even for all of you guys out there or women, when you don't want to do something at work, just remember what you can always use. Use your imaginary family. I told this woman that I had to do school events with my children, with all my 10 children. Whether she bought that or not, who knows? But it's always better to have an excuse that sounds like it's not your fault. And using your kids, even when you don't have any kids like I don't, as an excuse for not going to company events, it's a lot better than saying I don't want to go to something like that, because that makes them feel like, well, if he doesn't want to go, then that means uh, that he doesn't feel welcome, and it's not true. It's just a lot of us don't like mandatory fun at work, and I am a big advocate against mandatory fun. Anyhow, getting back to this, how quickly ambition can turn into exploitation. Do you know where the exploitation comes from? Your workers. Because as a small business, and I've heard this said for many, many years, let's pick restaurants since we're already there. If you're a restaurant owner, you're going to live by the same expression throughout the entire time, from the moment you become a business owner until the second that you realize that your business is going nowhere. There are no customers in your lobby. Your restaurant is tanking and you know it. But at the same time, when you come into your business, you still have to look at the sad faces of all of your minimum wage workers. And when they look at you, and some of them might even be homeless. Because I remember watching a story on Vice News, I don't know, about a year ago, of a restaurant owner in Colorado. It was a ski resort town. And sure, she had plenty of customers coming into the store and it was doing really well. But all of her employees were dirt poor. So she would let them live in housing that she had created. It was I think some of it was tents out in the backyard of the property, but she went on to this into this news article feeling like she was the biggest hero out there because she was providing her minimum wage workers a job and very, very crappy housing. I mean, when you're housing your employees in tents behind your business, you're not any sort of hero. And after the interview, she must have gotten so much hate because this was her trying to resolve the problem of paying her workers minimum wage, of exploiting the hell out of them. But in the restaurant industry, it's normal to depend entirely on tips. That's why the hourly wage, at least here in Arizona, for tipped workers in restaurants or in eating facilities, was like $2.50 an hour, and workers are expected to make the rest of their hourly wages on tips. Where I could see that if you're working in a fancy restaurant. I've met a lot of girls who worked in upscale restaurants and made $50,000 a year. I don't know if they're making that anymore, but while I was in college, it wasn't uncommon for a bartender, a really attractive female bartender, to make a lot of money. But for everyone else, the bus boys, the regular waiters, the unattractive people that work there, they weren't making what those other people were making. But the business owner will still come in and tell you that the reason he can't pay you more is because of those razor thin profit margins that they keep claiming. But at the same time, despite the owner knowing that things aren't looking good for his business, the owner always drives the nice car. The owner always lives in the right zip code. And the owner is going to have life much easier than any of his employees. So inevitably, when he has to come in and tell his employees that he's filing for bankruptcy because he can't keep the business going because of, let's just say, the excuse here is that there isn't enough traffic for that particular restaurant. I've seen so many mom and pop restaurants go under just like every other small business. Like yesterday morning, I was driving through the shopping center across the street from my house and looking at all of the empty businesses. In fact, I went and I looked in one of them that looked abandoned. So I put my hands up against the glass and I looked inside and I saw some guy in the back cleaning up. And I'm like, well, at least there's one person in here. But the exploitation is very real, whether it's at the top of a very wealthy corporation or it's a small business owner. The only way that you can make your business successful, especially the smaller ones, is going to be to maximize your minimum wage workforce. Not only that, but you're also going to more than likely be have more part-time employees than full-time employees, because the great thing about part-time employees is that they don't need anything other than their hourly paycheck. You don't have to pay them benefits. It's true plantation style exploitation. All right, getting into my second talking or third talking point. Do you know what it feels like to work harder than ever before and still fall further behind? I skip meals to pay suppliers. I work 16-hour days, sometimes sleeping in the back room because I couldn't afford gas to drive home. And when I couldn't keep up, they came for me. Creditors, landlords, and even my own employees. Uh, 80% of small businesses fail in the first year, 50% close within 5. Those are the odds that you're up against as a small business owner. And believe me, when you stop paying your employees because you run out of money halfway through their monthly schedule, the employees are going to get angry. Why? Because they're counting. When people live paycheck to paycheck, if your employer doesn't pay you, it's your first sign that you're going to be homeless soon, because you don't, if you're working that job, you don't have options as a worker. You're just a worker, and there are not going to be very, either you're going to ask your parents, your friends, or someone else because the business owner didn't pay you. And I can't say that I've ever been in a situation where my paycheck bounced. I have been a couple times where my time card didn't get put in on time because my boss decided that he had better things to do than to approve my time card. So I didn't get paid for 2 weeks. And it was a terrible situation that I got put into. But luckily at that time, when that happened to me the last time, I had just gotten a brand new credit card with a $2,000 credit limit. And I had to rely on that credit card until I got paid next time. And I told myself that as soon as I got my full paycheck, that I'd pay off the credit card that I put all my bills on until the next pay period. But guess what? I didn't. You know why I didn't? Because the bills that I had, I just didn't have the money to pay it back. I already had other bills that were taking up the money that I had already spent. It was as I remember it, it was almost exactly a year ago, and I was just like, I'm so far behind on my bills that even $2,000, even getting another $2,000 in that pay period was still not going to be sufficient. And so I'm still carrying that debt right now. I think I'm making minimum payments on that credit card. All right, let's get to our final talking point as I've reached nearly the 20-minute mark. They don't tell you that to survive, you might have to cut wages, skip health care insurance for yourself and your employees, or charge prices that you know your customers can barely afford. They don't tell you that being your own boss sometimes means becoming someone you never wanted to be. That's exactly how I felt when I got my first employee at my current job. I'd never been in charge of another person in my entire life. I'm not management material. But when I saw every single one of my Gen Zers that I've had since I started working this job has had the same problem: money. And the more I talk to them, my latest one, my current one, is probably the worst one because he's currently not living with his parents, but he's on his way to moving back in with his parents. Um, because you can see, and I actually had this discussion with him this morning, because at the end of every month, instead of being able to save money in order to have a savings account, in order to be able to, just to prepare just in case something happens, every month that he's worked for me, he's had to take money out of his savings account in order to cover rent, car payment, and expenses. This is a person that truly eats ramen as a main part of that person's diet, because that's what happens with people like this. And his unrealistic standards for life, like he keeps saying these things to me, like I want to work remote, and I'm like, they're never going to let you work remote, and the hours are never going to change. And the reason for that, it is an entry level, low level position that hired you. Can you imagine? Well, let's say you started working at let's call it a Taco Bell, and one day you come in and you tell your boss that you feel like you need to work remote. You know what your boss is going to say to you? You don't work here anymore. We don't have remote employees here. Remote employees is a white collar job. You signed up for a job that is purely labor. There's no remote work. And no matter how many times you tell that employee, there's no such thing as remote work in a low level entry level job. In order to be remote, your work would have to be 100% certain that you are going to actually be doing work related tasks when your job is making tacos at Taco Bell. It just doesn't work. But again, that's just Gen Zero. Gen Zero has these ideas about the way that the world should be, and they're not real. And unfortunately, you have to keep telling them that job flexibility, good benefits, high wages, all of these things are not going to be part of their lives. Most of them are going to live miserable, terrible lives, and they're going to have to live at home and live those miserable and terrible lives. They're not going to be able to grow up and go into their own homes, live their own lives, and have their own relationships. It's hard to meet the woman of your dreams while you're playing Call of Duty in your parents' basement. It's hard to build wealth while you're in your parents' basement. It's hard to build wealth when you're working an entry level job that's mainly labor. But that's what's happening. And Gen Zero, and bless their hearts, have just said we can't live like this. And the reality is there's no other option. There's no plan B in this world. If there was an escape hatch from the reality of life right now, I would be pulling on that lever nonstop all day. It would be pulling on that lever for the escape hatch and shaking hands with the governor in the other all day long, back and forth all day until something broke off. But that's a story for another day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and you enjoyed the humor, because I try to inject humor into all my videos. Remember, these videos are supposed to be funny. Don't take them seriously.